Hi, and welcome to She's the Boss, the show that is all about female founders and women doing extraordinary things in business. And oh boy, has my next guest ticking all those boxes. She is absolutely extraordinary. Fabian Dattner is the CEO of the Dattner Group and of Compass, which she founded for women. The CEO of Homeward Bound, which is a global initiative that you might have seen on the ABC, but we'll talk about it. She's been voted in the top 100 women of influence. She's been a runner-up for the Telstra Businesswoman of the Year more than once. And she is an all-round bloody awesome woman because I've met her. So, Fabian, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Julia. What a wonderful experience.
It's my absolute pleasure.
Actually, I call you Jules, don't I? Not Julia.
Yeah.
Jules.
Yeah, Jules is my preference, yes.
Yeah, hello, Jules. Lovely to be
I'm
here.
actually Julianne, which nobody ever knows, but I guess they'll know now. But I always said to my parents, why did you call me that? So anyway, Jules it is. So I want to know first about these businesses that you're running. So talk to us a little bit about the Dattner Group, about Compass and about Homeward Bound.
Okay. Well, Compass is actually part of the Dattner Group. So the Dattner Group, or its first iteration, was founded in the very early 1990s when I had closed down the Stephen Dattner Group, which was a national group of businesses that my father had founded. And I started Fabian Dattner and Co. in 1990. And then the Dattner Group, or Dattner Grant, in its first iterations, was formed out of it. So we're specialist leadership consultancy, but we do a lot of transformational change with big and small organisations, a lot of executive and senior leadership work for men and for women. We're diagnostic specialists. We have a big coaching division. And we also have a division that is all about elevating courage in women to take their role together in visible leadership. So Compass is an amazing program with thousands of people in its alumni. And that's a 3-month program. The Homeward Bound project is the big international project that grew out of a dream and now has some 800 people involved, and we're in some 56 different nationalities and 43 different sciences.
That's incredible. But tell people what it is, because I watched the documentary last night that was on the ABC. So if anyone's watching this, go on to ABC iView. And I think is it called Leaders?
The Leadership.
The Leadership. Because, of course, it's on a ship. But tell everyone, I don't want to spoil the surprise. You tell everybody what you do with Homeward Bound, because it's amazing.
Well, it's me and a very, very big and important group of collaborators. It's a leadership initiative to elevate the visibility of women leading with a STEM background. And it was dreamt of, I literally dreamt it into life in October of 2015 in bed next to my husband. I saw us on a ship. I saw the banner Homeward Bound. I saw a film crew behind us. I knew we were in Antarctica, and I knew who the women were in front of us.
That's extraordinary.
I know.
You had this dream and manifested it. That's
totally
amazing.
And how that happened is I woke up and, of course, told my husband, first of all, who's a philosopher. And if anyone is married to a philosopher, you will know they have an untrammeled sleep. And he said, oh, that's an amazing dream. So what are we going to have for breakfast? And I felt the dream was worth more consideration than that. So I rang a young marine biologist who had done the Compass program the preceding year. I told her of the dream and I said, I've just got this strange feeling that this is doable. And she said, I think it's a fantastic idea. Why don't you try writing it down? And as fate would have it, that day I had a 3-hour meeting cancelled. And I thought, damn it, I'm going to put the scope of this idea down on paper and send it to Jess. Jess then escalated through the Australian Antarctic division seeking opinions from other women. And everyone was saying, what a great idea, why don't we do it? And 2 women in particular who were to become co-founders, Dr. Justine Shaw and Dr. Marianne Lee, both very experienced Southern Ocean Antarctic scientists in their own right. There was a famous moment where we met outside the Australian Antarctic division on a little wooden table. We'd been talking about the idea. And I said, look, come on, do we think we can do it? And they looked at me and I looked at them and they said, yes. I said, yes. Let's shake hands. Let's do it. And so we parceled out various responsibilities. And there's a famous saying in startups. No one ever follows the founding entrepreneur, actually, more often than not, because they're too crazy, too at the edge, too risky.
I think that's why I like them.
Yeah, but people follow the first follower. So in those 3 women, we were able to go out to a global network of women in Antarctic science, and we gave ourselves 6 months to get the first 100 women, and we got 180 expressions of interest in 6 weeks. So we knew we had a great idea. It took us 2 years to build the project, and we went in December of 2016.
Well, I mean, clearly it was totally life-changing for the women that were there. But I think having watched the show, the thing that really got to me was how isolated those women are. That they are literally, I mean, and I've interviewed some of them, and they say I'm the only woman on the oil rig, or, I was the only woman in this little mining town. But I don't think I really got it until you got them all together and I saw on the show the power of them understanding that they're not alone.
Oh,
I think that was really probably more than anything what struck me was they don't have that access to other women to understand that, that you've got someone that you can say, I know what it's like.
Well, that highlights a foundational principle in the work we do everywhere with women, is that we will never be the strongest or the tallest. We will never have the sharpest teeth or the worst claws. Somebody will always run faster than us, but our strength is in numbers. And so what happens when we bring them together, for many of them, it will be the first time in their lives they've had a 100% constructive, supportive, loving community of brilliant minds who have one interest, and that is our collective success. And we're tackling 4 agreed principles, and we're now up to Homeward Bound 7. And in every one of these, one is that the practice of leadership is collapsing. 2, the pernicious absence of women has to be addressed.
Has to be, yeah.
3, we live in a time where fact and belief are treated equally, and they're not. You're entitled to your beliefs, but not to your facts. Science may be an imperfect art form, but it's the best we've got. Pay attention to what science says. And the 4th one is our planet's in crisis. So those 4 principles came together with the right audience at the right time with the right outcome, and it's just gone nuts. So that first 2 years was without question the hardest of my life. And if I had known how hard that would be, I'm not sure I would have started.
But Fabian, I reckon every female founder out there, in fact, every founder probably says the same thing. At the time, there is a great saying that there is ignorance in ignorance is bliss, and it's so true. Or that what's the other one about? Basically going where angels fear to tread. But basically, if you don't know what you don't know, then you're not scared of it. So you just go ahead.
Exactly. And look, I've started quite a lot of things in my life, but I think the difference was, one is the pod environment. If you take people, now 80% of the program is delivered on the ground. So it's a global virtual community. It's a comprehensive development process. We have 100 coaches globally. We have 30 people on the faculty.
Wow.
It's an all donated help.
It's huge.
And it's a massive initiative to get the women ready to collaborate in the world for the greater good. And they will collaborate as a collective. They'll collaborate in smaller groups. We have, nearly 100 are in a committee of the parties for climate change initiative. We've had 90 working on a marine park in Antarctic.
Yes, I love it. It's just brilliant what you're doing. I mean, I think for any women out there, and I'm certainly one of them who wants to affect change, to see somebody like you who's gone and done it, and really what you're doing with those women is helping all the rest of us, because all those women are forging a path, and now they've got the support to do it, and we need them. We need, as you and I have discussed before, we need women everywhere. We need them in these roles, and particularly scientific women who've, have got the facts at their fingertips and are getting very little support within their organisations. I'm not saying all of them, but a lot of them.
Absolutely. But there's a little thing I have to say, and I'm not saying it in order not to step into the place and accept what I contributed to, but rather to say we tested a very different model of leading. So the collaboration that creates Homeward Bound is a true collaboration. There is effectively no hierarchy. So anyone can spark up around the world, take the proposition and activate it as they see fit. And that's a very
Fantastic.
hard principle to help people come to understand, because most people don't trust leaders and they think there's a second agenda at work. So it's a fully fledged not-for-profit, and it has a board of governance, and we do everything in our power to make sure it's deeply, deeply collaborative, inclusive, legacy-minded, trusted with assets.
Well, it certainly looked incredible on the documentary, and I love the concept behind it. But this show is all about you. So I want to know, and for anybody of my age or slightly younger, I'm sure we all grew up with you. I remember you doing ads or being on television a lot back in the 80s. So I want to know all about your life. So let's start with Fabian as a teenager. Tell me what it was like going to school and what kind of a family you grew up in.
I was, do you know the word halcyon? That's beautiful, when things are really just unbelievably, beautifully perfect. My childhood was halcyon. And I had a very close relationship with both my parents. I grew up in Eltham, which is where the counterculture of Australia was. So the weekends were full of outrageously good food, crazy long lunches, wine. The children were always welcome in one way or another, listening to artists, poets, politicians, playwrights talk about what it took to make a mark in the world, and that humanity moves forward on the back of difference, not on the back of sameness. That was kind of a consistent weekend message. But during the week, I was a weekly boarder at St Catherine's, which was a Church of England school in Toorak. And so I actually got the best of two worlds. It was a very conservative schooling, and then a very left-wing and free-range weekend. And
perfect.
The only sort of little black mark is that the reality was I was a fairly eccentric character at St Catherine's, and I do remember trying to teach the prefects how to roll joints up an oak tree at the back of the school.
I love that. I went to a boarding school, St Catherine's in England, and I'll tell you, it was nothing like that. It was horrible. So you did school, you enjoyed it. What did you decide to do when you finished? Because, and we should also mention your dad, because you said your dad set up that group, but it was a very big group in Australia at the time.
Yeah, it was. But the business side is nowhere near as big a part as the history of the family and the private side. So my mother's father was the last foreign affairs advisor to Haile Selassie. My mum, for the first 7 years of her life, was brought up in Ethiopia. My father's family, his grandfather was the last chief rabbi of Moscow. So you've got Orthodox British and Orthodox Judaism, which normally crash. And my father and mother met in the war in Positano in Italy, and it was, I think, lust at first sight. And he was already married to a young Jewish woman in the famous Sadler's World Ballet Company, in the Corps de Ballet. But he and Mum decide to come to Australia. He goes back to England, gets a divorce. It was a war bride. They come to Australia and they begin the journey of creating a separate life here. Because coming from an Orthodox Jewish family, they would have thought he was condemned to eternal hell.
Yes,
but
absolutely.
They were both
completely ostracised.
Yeah, my mother was an artist. He had been involved in theatre in London, so that very quickly became a big part of our lives. Theatre, artists, playwrights.
You're so lucky.
Very. My brothers didn't enjoy the same upbringing. For them, it was much harder, but for me, I was the third.
Well, I mean, did you all grow up together, or you just different relationships with the parents?
Fundamentally different relationships with my father. Very powerful man, big, and I think he had a much more orthodox perspective on what boys should and shouldn't do.
Right.
And
how's that about a turnaround from the normal thing where the woman is the girl is the one who's being held back and the boys are all being lauded? I love your dad.
Yeah. Well, but it does harm both ways, and it did harm to my brothers. My second brother went on to have a phenomenal career, as many people know, in table making. Yeah. So, they and both are very creative, artistic people. So my dad and I are terribly alike. We're terribly alike, and we were very, very close friends. So my life was great. When I came out of university, which I feel like I kind of fibbed my way through, I was very successful at university. And
what were you studying?
I was studying social sciences and history, which I love.
Okay.
But I also discovered a very inventive brain. And I came out, and what I really wanted to do was get into publishing, writing. I mean, I had a passion for books from a tiny age. And I went for a job with Nick Hudson, who was the then managing director of Heinemann Educational. And it was probably one of my more famous lies. In the interview, which was for his secretary, at the end of an interview where we got on like a house on fire, he asked me if I could do typing and shorthand. And
because you were going for a secretarial job,
that basic requirement. I quick as a flash said yes.
Right.
And that following week, I went and studied T-line self-taught, and I got an IBM Selectric and started to learn how to type. I go for the first day on the job, and I'm expecting it to be, cream and dancing in the meadows. What actually I discovered was I couldn't spell.
Oh, no.
And so began one of the best relationships of my life, because Nick didn't fire me straight away, which he could have done. He slapped down the pocket Oxford on the table and said, "You have 2 months to learn to spell." What he discovered is you actually have to know how to spell to look a word up in the Oxford Dictionary, which gave birth to the Heinemann Australian Dictionary, and I became the test dummy for the development of that dictionary. If I couldn't find a word, they had to find a simpler way to do it. And so I learned to spell, and I became an editor, and the rest is history.
No, it isn't history at all, because we don't know the rest of it. So, so you worked for this guy. When did you start working for your dad? Was that after this job?
That was after. So I was, like so many women in business, I had the lead editor and Nick both declare their lust and love for me. I was at the time married with one child, and we had a nursery in at the office. And so I sort of bolted from publishing and left them to their imaginings. And at that time, I'd applied to Melbourne University to do a second degree in law. Mm-hmm. But I'd just come out of 6 years of editing. And when I sat down to do the exam, I thought it was insulting and puerile. So I got about
arrogance there.
None. I got about a third of the way through, and then I wrote a series of critiques of the questions they were asking, and I made a little summary paragraph at the bottom saying the extent to which I thought it belittled the university and the intake for law to have it. And I left. Little did I know that's actually what they were looking for. So I was a mature age student, and I was offered one of the 3 top outcomes in the exam, because that's what they were actually looking for. Then I got pregnant.
Then I got one out of the box.
Then I got pregnant, and then Dad got very sick, and I couldn't do all 3, so I dropped law and went and worked for my dad.
Right, and how long did? But because certainly in the documentary I was watching last night, I think it was, you say something about, I was given this fantastic business and I brought it to its knees within a year. Was that what happened?
No, I don't say that. No. So
tell me about it anyway.
Yeah.
So tell me.
So what actually happened is I joined in 83, and I joined as part of the sales team. I can sell, so I quickly rose up through the ranks. I became sales manager, then sales director. Then I became marketing director, and I really worked in that role for about 4 years until my.
I was going to say. Right, how long that lasted, yeah.
Then Dad retired. He was sick. He was basically very sick. He had to step down. And I ran the business, and we ran into the famous Paul Keating recession. We had to have interest rates at 21%. And also I had just launched a big tourism project called Settlers & Co. with Cosmire. And then we got the big pilot strike. So those 3 combined put us in a very precarious place financially.
Yeah.
But the truth of the matter is I was, all of 30, and I knew nothing about running business. I just could spin a story, and I was an incredible marketer. But I didn't understand business. I couldn't read a, financial data.
But wasn't there a management team there to help you?
Yeah, but you got
still
someone
got to lead them.
Yeah, no, it's not that. I just think I was. I created what I deserved, and I don't blame anything or anyone for that. It became a massive lesson in my life, and I also think at some level I valued my father more than my own values because truthfully I've been an animal rights activist all my life.
Right.
And the family all knew, don't talk family business at the dinner table because I'm not a pleasant dinner companion if you do. But then I put that to one side and started working for Dad, who I love.
Okay.
I learned a lot.
Okay. Yeah. But I mean, that recession, for anyone who's listening who's younger, of younger ages, there was a recession that came that really I mean, the interest rates at the moment are 0 or 1%. They went to nearly 18, 19%.
Oh, 21, 22, 23.
There you go.
Yeah.
Just like absolutely unaffordable. No one could get employment. It
No,
was a terrible time.
Terrible time.
But it gave you some experience, and it gave you a huge opportunity. So what happened next? What happened after you left? It
wasn't what happened. We had receivers appointed in the business, and I persuaded them to let me do the wind up of it. And so on the cusp of 89, 90, when retail sales plummeted, absolutely plummeted, we put on this massive closing down campaign, and we were the first of the high-profile businesses to close down.
Right.
And millions of people came out of the woodwork. So not only were we able to save our business, we were able to save a lot of businesses in Melbourne because they put their stock into the sale, and it came under
fantastic.
our banner, and we were able to repay the bank. And the bank then said, we will refund you to get going again on a smaller scale. And I caucused with my loving family. Our mum was living with Ken and myself, my husband, and we all agreed, no, it's time to do what you believe is important. But that was letting go of 300 years of history because my family had been...
Oh, my God. I didn't realise it was so long.
Yeah, very long. So my great-great-great-great-grandfather was part of opening up Canada with the Hudson Bay Company. So it's a long history.
Yeah, right. Okay, so did you take some time out after that to think about what you wanted to do next?
No, I knew. I'd already been helping another big fashion brand who I won't mention in terms of purpose and engagement, because that was something I really loved and understood, even when running the Dattner Group. And I decided I wanted to write a book about what had happened because there was this horrible muddying in 1989-90 about the notion of success and failure. And I wrote a book that said failure is actually healthy. So here's why.
Pretty controversial at the time, I would think, when everybody was wearing big shoulder pads and trying to, make as much money as they could.
Yeah, but Penguin published it. It was a very successful book. It was called Nothing Ventured, Nothing Gained. But it was that strange thing. I noticed that women and men reacted differently. Men would approach you going, oh, really sorry to hear about the closure of business. You gave it its best shot. And women would go, oh, that was an amazing thing. You did well in the close down. What did you learn? What are you going to do differently?
Right.
What's lying ahead? So there was a sense of gather up the learning and move on. With the men, it was, what a horrible thing to face. Must all be over.
Well, because, they would be projecting how they would feel, I guess, whereas... Anyway, okay, so what made you start the Dattner Group, which I think you said at the beginning wasn't called the Dattner Group, but was it something that had happened when you were running your dad's company that gave you a light bulb moment, or what was it that suddenly made you want to go out and start teaching people about leadership?
Well, I didn't suddenly do it. So I think I have been interested in how human beings tick from my very early 20s. I just...
Sounds like I would say even when you were at school, maybe.
Yeah, well, somewhat.
Things.
So leadership and understanding how people tick has always been of interest to me, and a belief that the practice of leadership needed to change, that the whole notion of a hierarchy and success and failure paradigm and only one person having all the answers always felt deeply wrong to me. Yeah. So the work that I started to do was to go out and interview organisations that were in trouble to hear from their people what their people felt could be done differently. And if leaders were able to listen to their people, could businesses turn around? And so I did that for about 3 years, and it always worked. It always worked. And so I wrote my second book, which is Naked Truth, an Open Letter to the Australian Community. And it just said, the truth is in the voices of the people if you have the courage to listen. So your job as a leader is to sit amongst and facilitate and enable, not sit on top and judge. And that's how the company started to form. And then I'm a diagnostic specialist, so I specialize in diagnostics that are used to help people understand themselves.
Right.
So then I was in business with a man called Jim Grant for a number of years. And then he and I parted.
Is this sort of was this one-on-one kind of coaching with people
Oh,
at that stage?
we had very big contracts, things like with the Child Support Agency, with 300 leaders, or we would do a small startup. And this is really annoying. It's so funny, these things, we make ourselves look beautiful, then we adjust them endlessly. Sorry if it's annoying all of you watching. It's really cold.
I'm sure it is, and I'm sure that they're just focusing on what you're saying because it's all amazing. Okay, so you start this group. You started it small.
Yeah, it was Fabian, Dattner and Co. But it was very successful, and we would be doing this what I called honesty auditing. And from the honesty auditing, we would begin to see stuff around people didn't know why the business existed, didn't understand the values that underpinned it, and the strategy wasn't clear. So I began to develop skill in all those three areas, and I had a lot of personal experience. So I start helping communities articulate it. And then the diagnostics are building. Then in 96, around about 96, 97, Jim Grant came out of the corporate sector and bought half the business. He and I'd worked together in the turnaround of a big, heavily unionized petrochemical site. And he and I worked together for about 20 years. And then I think he was really looking to wind down. And I felt like I was just finding my voice. So he left. I took over the company, and he has a coaching practice for executives. And we've gone on from height to height. And the Dattner Group came.
Well,
I was just saying the Dattner Group was branded Dattner Group when Jim and I parted company. So it went from Dattner Grant to Dattner Group then.
Oh, okay. That sort of makes sense.
Yeah.
And so how did the business develop? And then suddenly, I don't know whether it was suddenly, but then Compass comes into the play as well. How did that all fit together, and when did that happen?
Well, I think like anyone who's done a startup or got a business going, it starts with here's the thing I think about entrepreneurs. I think entrepreneurs see a problem, not an opportunity. They see a problem that they think they can solve.
Oh.
And I think that's
that's an interesting interpretation, because most people would say that it's entrepreneurs see opportunities where others don't see them, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's what people who look at entrepreneurs say, but all the entrepreneurs I know saw a problem and thought they could fix it, and saw how to fix it.
Yeah.
So for me, I worried that so many of the leadership groups I was working with were either 100% men or at best 75% men, 25% women. And I would notice that when the women were with the men, the conversations were always very stilted. But when I would turn around and have the women on my own in a break, suddenly there was this easy flow. Yeah, like your famous Friday lunches. And I think I worried that we weren't being visible. And so I experimented with a program maybe 15 years ago called Up the Ladder in a Skirt.
I love the name.
Yeah, which actually worked. It was really successful. Then I got sort of busy again with a lot of other big project work, but then the problem seemed worse. So that's when Compass came into being, and now we've had...
So it was just the idea of plucking some of those women out and letting them work together so that they would kind of open up and support each other. Was that sort of what was the rationale to pull those women out and start a second course?
It was to recognise that, one, women are stronger together. We're better if we do this together. Two, we want to have an impact. And three, the impact that most matters to us has a legacy to it. Unlike men, are much more about, what I do, what I achieve, how I defend and look after my family. It's what I make and I have and what I retire with. That's just never my conversation with women.
We're much more about the village, aren't we?
Yes, yes. And actually having children and not caring so much about money is actually a gift. I often wonder whether is it that men are paid too much, women too little, or that we should reduce all the executive salaries because they're mythical. They're inappropriate.
Well, I have to say, now that we're on that topic, that one of the best things that I saw out of the GFC, and if you remember, there was I think it was the 99% were the people who were camping out and trying to say, you know, that the banks needed to be made accountable for the fact that they had pretty much brought the whole bloody world to its knees. And I saw this fantastic sign where someone said there should be a maximum wage. And I thought, why has that never come out? It's just funny that you're talking about it, because I often think they should say like $10 million, that's it. Any money that you earn over that, you've got to put back into a pot, or come up with a number. But the fact that there can be multi-billionaires is, you know, I think we all agree, totally wrong. But I loved that thinking of, you know, we have a minimum wage. Why don't we have a maximum wage?
Yeah, I think too, the thing is not about whether there are billionaires, because you're entitled to have the benefit of the shares of something you created. But you're not entitled to a salary that's 10 times the next salary. That's the cruel issue. And so nobody is that capable. Just not true. And in this day and age, it's even more true that you're not that capable. You should be paid fairly, but you're not worth 10 times more than the next person. And that's where it's got out of control with executive teams, where people
totally
are paid.
Out of control.
Yeah.
And in the finance industry.
Oh, crazy.
Particularly.
Just
kind of silly money.
Yeah. And then people who are shit leaders are then given massive payouts when they leave.
But some of them have done a really bad job, and they're leaving because they're leaving under a cloud, and they still walk out with $15 million or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very hard for, you know, normal people anyway, I think, to watch that kind of thing happening. And it's extremely frustrating if we can't do anything to change it, which I believe now, with what's happened post-COVID, and I know you certainly are at the forefront of this, but this movement that's happening, and I feel it particularly with women, where we have waited long enough for things to slowly change. It's time to just get out
rapidly
and start our
change
own.
them.
Yeah.
Well, when you throw into the mix, as we do with Homeward Bound, what's happening to the planetary systems, we don't have time to argy-barge. We know that we're past saving the planet. Everyone knows that. So I hope every listener knows that. We're not going to save the planet.
It's a very sober thought, isn't it?
It's terrible. Yeah. It's terrible. What we might do is learn to live with it. So it's all about adaptation now. So if that's true, then who are best at this, and what skills do we need? We need collaboration, inclusion, legacy mindset, and we need people to be trusted with assets, money, and
community building and things like that as well, which is all very,
We need them in massive numbers right now.
Yep, absolutely. And everything that we can do to get women into politics, women on boards, and women in those senior positions where they can actually affect change.
And laterally.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the founding principles. So what we do in Compass, for instance, we build a sense of intention. Why are you in Compass? Why do you make the choices you make for yourself, for your family, and in your working life? Are you clear about why you're doing those things? Do you have an overarching why? Are you able to articulate the values that drive your behavior for yourself, in your relationships, in your working life? I'm
interested to ask, of the women that join with you at the beginning, do they feel that they don't have, like, I'm working because I'm just working? I don't know, I'm just doing it. And then they walk away later going, now I know why I'm doing it.
Oh, absolutely.
But once you understand that, you know what to reject and what to accept in terms of opportunities.
The famous, once I know what to say yes to, I know what to say no to. But if I say yes to everything, then no has no meaning. And
I've never heard that before. That's brilliant.
People will run over you. So our work with women is you've got to take time to sort your own thinking around strategy, purpose, values. And then you've got to find out, what do you aspire to? And what we find is women get aspirations that are really clear for relationships and work, but have no clarity about themselves. So they're drifting, or they have real clarity about themselves and work, but no relationships. So it's getting clear where the gap in life is. Then we give them a massive insight into the story they tell themselves. What are you saying to yourself in your own head about yourself, that inner critic? And then finally we help them say, how do you unstick that? How do you bring the best of who you are into the world?
Getting goosebumps even as you're saying this. It's just So brilliant. It's just so perfect for what women need. And for our next stage, because our next stage is we are going to rise up and we are going to need that kind of sense of purpose and understanding ourselves.
Yes.
So I just love it. So so then Compass came along and you started working with that as well. Can you talk to me, and then you've got Homeward Bound as well. Can you talk to me about maybe some pivotal moments that you've had building up any or all of your businesses? But I guess, as you say, we learn it when we make mistakes, and you've told us of a couple of them, but have there been any other ones where, you know, I guess my big thing that I say to people is I used to ask people, you know, have there been any successes or failures that you've learned from? And I realized very early on that we don't really learn a lot out of success.
No,
to celebrate.
No.
And that it all really comes from what at the time can sometimes feel like an absolute disaster. And yet you look back on it and you kind of go, I'm kind of glad that happened because it made me take this other direction.
Well,
have you had any instances
many,
like that?
many.
That
is such a key part of my thinking. If you have a success, its value to you in terms of learning is 1 for 1. If you have a big failure, it's a 10-to-1 ratio. So the learning impact is 10 times. Yeah, 10 times the cost of the mistake. So if you enter into the mistake and say, what did I learn from it? So I've had many. I could keep you going for hours on this. But if I were to give you, you know, one in my recent life, remembering I'm 67 and my career changed completely at 60. So not changed, but I added on Homeward Bound, which is no small thing. But to get Homeward Bound off the ground, to the comment you started with, what you don't know doesn't get in the way of you doing something when you're an entrepreneur. And I would describe myself as a social entrepreneur. And 2 years it took us to get the first voyage up. And that included getting a ship and getting everyone on that ship and designing a program and a faculty, getting to Antarctica, being in a pod environment, surviving the months together, and then getting everyone back. And in the 2 years to do the logistics for that, we were dancing like pixies in the field with stardust in our eyes. It could be nothing but monumentally successful. And we arrive in Ushuaia and we meet everyone. And I instantly begin to see with retrospect that the me who met them must have been overwhelming and a larger than life personality. And the way I spoke.
Well, let me, I mean, because that does come up a little bit in the show, but I actually think that in the film, is part of it is the kinds of women. So if you've got women who are scientists, a lot of them, and I'm only using broad brushstrokes, are quite introverted. They also haven't seen a lot of dominant women or women helping them in a positive way. So I don't know that it was necessarily you. I mean, I've seen some of the footage. You seem to be what I would expect someone to be like in a rah-rah kind of environment. But you just had women that hadn't had any exposure to it and were really nervous and surrounded by a whole lot of women, which they weren't used to.
I think all that's true, but I think I don't help people, and you've kind of hit the nail on the head. It's not my natural predisposition when I'm helping people, particularly women, to come from a rah-rah context. I'm not an American motivator. We're a super informed leadership practice, and all the faculty were incredibly informed individuals. But what happened, we were all exhausted. That moment where you see us welcoming people, we had been up for 48 hours managing massive behind the scenes logistics problems.
Oh my God.
And I think it was intoxicating. And so we take off. You have the incredible challenge of the Drake Passage where everyone gets sick. And we arrive.
I did look at the boat and think I would never, ever, ever be able to do that program with you, just because even looking at the boat made me feel ill.
Well, I'm chronically motion sick, so I also brought. I was one of two.
What made you think of a boat then?
I don't know what insanity that was, my love. But you can. The thing is, you can take drugs for it, and they work perfectly.
Yeah.
And once you're in Antarctica, it's like glass, dead flat.
Right.
And so it just began the journey and insights about how people were selected, what their expectations were. I learned about how I speak and the language I use, and I needed to tone everything back and down, speak slower, speak clearer. We would have, multiple cultures there. I'm a person that loves hugging people. I'm a very physically affectionate person. Maybe it felt like you were being hugged by a giant. I don't know. But everything had to tone down, slow down, get clearer, be more precise for that community, which is what we have learned. So the next year, nothing like that experience happened at all.
I bet. Mm. And now, what did you say? You've done 4 or 5 of them now.
We've actually 4 times to Antarctica, but we've got Homeward Bound 5 and 6 ended up being 100% on the ground because we can't go to Antarctica. We hope we will go November next year with Homeward Bound 5 and March the following year with Homeward Bound 6, but we don't know.
Amazing. But I mean, what I was going to say is, the first one, and as you clearly said at the beginning of this, it's like beta testing it, we've got to go out, get your feedback and then work it out. So I'm sure the second one was better, but by now I imagine it's a sort of a well-oiled machine almost.
I want it to be a well-oiled machine. It's the most complex thing I've ever done. We're now fully fledged not-for-profit. We have a board. We have a big faculty. We have, 100 coaches around the planet. It's so complex. It's such a complex group to help. But it's working, but none of it is easy. It's hard yards for everybody.
Yeah, I bet. Okay, so look, we haven't got very much longer, and I could talk to you for hours and hours, but one of the things I wanted to know is what's coming up next? What does Fabian Dattner want to do next, other than obviously finish the Homeward Bound 1,000 women thing, if not more? But what else have you got on your horizon?
I have lots of projects. I have a number of very big projects, but I have one massive one, which it's not just scientists that can go to Antarctica.
Ooh, right.
So I don't
won't ask anymore. I can hear it's.
I don't want to spoil it, but when it happens, it could have a very big global impact into the way we're communicating a future possible.
Oh my God, you are honestly such an inspirational woman. I have absolutely loved every minute of. I'm so glad I reached out to you actually, because I've loved getting to know you, and I've loved this interview. If anybody wants to do your programs, what are the best ways to get hold of you?
So I'm happy to give you my mobile, which is 04.
Don't.
Okay, I'm happy to give all that.
I'm thinking your web address. Okay,
so everyone can go onto dattnergroup.com.
Yep.
Also just put in Dattner Group, they'll come to our website, and the program is Compass, and they can register online. Most of it we're now doing virtually, which has been a phenomenal success. Women love the fact that there's just this little postage stamp. We don't judge weight, height, age, anything.
That is so interesting you say that, because I've had this conversation a couple of times with people, and they've said, I don't know whether I like Zoom, and I'm like, Zoom is amazing. Not only can it bring people from all around the world where we feel like we're in the same room, but like you say, nobody cares what clothes you're wearing. Yep. No one cares that you've got a big bum. No one cares about anything other than what's between those ears and what's coming out of your mouth.
And your beautiful face. Yeah, absolutely.
It's such an equalizer. I love it.
I think Zoom doesn't work with bad facilitation, but with good facilitation, it's exceptional. And so we're doing probably 1 or 2 face-to-face programs a year. All the others are virtual. And you can go online and book.
Wonderful. Well, listen, what can I say? Thank you so much for sharing some of your story. Obviously, I could do about 15 episodes with you, but thank you so much for what you've shared.
Thank you.
And I can't wait to see what you're going to do next. You're just extraordinary, Fabian. So thank you so much for giving me the time today.
And thank you, you extraordinary woman, as well. An honour to be with you.
What a pleasure.